Hi guys, welcome to another Mindset Moment with me, Adam. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about Star Wars. Star Wars was a big shaping force in my life growing up. Not only were the movies wonderful and awesome, the books, for me, were just as important. I spent most of junior high, high school, and college reading these books, the ones from the movies, and then the expanded universe that uh, so many books written about on these characters so much. I was a large nerd. But Star Wars taught me a lot of things, a lot of important things. One, it's always important to have the high ground. Two, the hatred of sand, because it's coarse and irritating and it gets everywhere. And three, guns make a pew pew sound when you shoot them. And finally, the most important one, they're not really dead unless you see a body looking directly at you, Emperor Palpatine. But one of the more major overarching themes of this franchise has been the theme of compassion. Compassion is defined and understood as a sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings and misfortunes of others. And I can see this theme when I look at Star Wars. For specifically, let's just even look at one of the movies, Return of the Jedi. We can see Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knights, going to this really newly rebuilt Death Star to save his father, to fight his father and confront the Empire, even though Obi-Wan and Yoda told him not to. Because he is refusing to get revenge on Vader. Instead, is planning to save him because he can feel the good inside him. He feels that he can turn Darth Vader back to the good. While after a long fight between Luke and Darth Vader, as we all know, Luke wins. And at the end, the Emperor, after defeating Darth Vader and the Emperor by default, Vader says that Luke was right. While he was not able to physically rescue his father, he rescued him emotionally and spiritually. Luke's compassion for his father, for his friends, and was a big overarching theme, and helped him win over the Empire instead of paving a path of deliverance that even some of these Jedi like Yoda and Obi-Wan couldn't figure out because they didn't understand compassion. Compassion is something that I believe a lot of us have the capability for, but don't really use. To some, compassion is a weakness. But for others, it's an emotion that is used on special occasion, is a limited emotion. Only may be used for special circumstances or on special people. The people that love and trust you back. Well, I'm not claiming to be a wellspring of compassion, but I'm trying. It's one thing that's been on my mind a lot lately. An awful lot. And today it's what we're going to help us understand that we need to be a source of compassion in a heartless world. And to help us understand this daunting post, this daunting idea, we need to go back to Scripture, see what God says about us, to us, about being example. And I want to use a lot from the life of Jesus. The first lesson that we understand to learn that, don't forget, we need to be a compassionate to all in this sin-filled, heartless world. The first group of people we should be compassionate towards are the hurting. Look at me in the book of Luke, chapter 7, verses 11 and 12. Now it happened the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, in a large crowd. And when he came near the gates of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother. and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. Here we have a moment from the earthly life of Jesus where he sees this single lady, a widow, in a large crowd. And Jesus focuses on her. This woman who had already lost her husband to death, now lost her only son too. She's left alone. No job, no supporters. Life can be cruel, people. Life can be cruel at times. How would you respond seeing this? How would you respond to this lady? Would it be with a hug? With a I'm sorry? A casserole? Maybe some thoughts and prayers? Would you just not do anything and go back to your normal life? Jesus takes a different approach. I want to continue with verses 13, 14, and 15 of chapter 7 of Luke. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came, touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." So he was dead, sat up, began to speak, and he presented him to her mother. Jesus was not lost, stuck in the emotion of the moment, but instead his compassion ran deep. The verb here that is used for compassion in the Greek here is a lot similar to the word pity or deep empathy, or my favorite, moved deeply to the bowels, to your inner self. Move deeply to the bowels, to the heart of the self. This is most definitely not a surface level emotion. Compassion is something that is a deep and complex thing. Can we honestly say that we show and have this type of compassion, this type of compassion that moves us deeply to our inner self, to the bowels, for a stranger that we just met across the room? Can we say that we have this type of compassion for our coworkers, the people we go to school with, the people in our neighborhood? Heck, do we have it for our close friends and our family? Our country, our world is filled with hurting people. Emotionally broken, physically ill, spiritually hurting. We can see from the example that Jesus gave us is that we are to be compassionate people, willing to help how we can with what they need. Showing true compassion and finding ways which we can help people. And this doesn't mean just so we can know and get it out right away. We be compassionate to their face and judgmental about them and their life choices behind their back. Nor should we be compassionate to them after a lecture of how they should feel and how they really should act. I think we're not good at being compassionate anymore. Could it be the times we live in where you need to be a little jaded towards life, heavily medicated on suspicion and some dark humor to get through the day? Little to no hope in the system or the people in it? I get it. It's difficult. America in a 2020 year has turned into a whole lot of difficult. But that still doesn't mean we can't be willing to help and actually help those people who are in need, and be a willing source of compassion to them. A quick example on this to help us understand what it means to be compassionate to those who are hurting. For a few days, our president was in the Walter Reed Hospital due to COVID. And I saw a large corner of the internet that cracked jokes about this and that lectured this point as being a byproduct of being unaware of COVID recommendations. May be true, Maybe not, and that's not the point. One person's response to our president being sick, and his response, put it in a good way, surprised me. Late night funny man Stephen Colbert, Stephen himself, started off his show last Friday in a most unusual way. Tore up the script, reshot it, started the show with a call with him to talking with his band by calling for everyone to be praying for our president. No matter if we like him or not, praying for him. And Stephen said quite bluntly, I'm not a fan. He did not like our president, but it's the right thing to do by showing him compassion and praying for him. Compassion for the hurting, like here with our president for those few days, is not something that we do when we feel like it or when it's convenient to us, but all the time and with sincerity from the bowels. Because we're not just to show compassion for the hurting. No, we're also supposed to show compassion to the needy. Jump with me to Matthew chapter 15, verses 29 through 32. Jesus departed from there, skirted the Sea of Galilee, and went up on the mountain and sat down there. The great multitudes came to him, having them the lame, blind, mute, maimed, and many other, and they laid them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. So the multitudes marveled when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed were whole, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. They glorified the God of Israel. Now Jesus called to his disciples to himself and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I don't want to send them home hungry, lest they faint along the way. Jesus drew such a crowd here as we read the introduction to the miracle known as the feeding of the 4,000. Where Jesus took a simple meal, some crackers and a few sardines, and fed over 4,000 people. But as we can see in these few days where Jesus helped anybody, made people see, made people walk, made people whole again, anybody that needed help, Jesus performed a miracle and helped them. Something that only God can do. Doing miracles like this is not common. It's something that's only God can do, and it's something that the world has not seen. It's no wonder why so many people came to see Jesus, why Jesus had such a growing and large crowd. And I'm assuming the more people got healed, the more people came. They stayed for the entire time, too. I wouldn't leave. This would be better than must-see TV. This is wonderful. But as evening grew on day number 3, Jesus couldn't just turn the lights on and continue. It was time to go home. 3 days. People were probably about it. Hungry, tired, ready to go. For comparison, this would be the equivalent for us of working 3 full, long days in a distant city and then having to walk home to get dinner. No. But as these days grew longer and tummies grew louder, did Jesus have to do anything? Could he just say, all right, it's been fun, out? Could he have? He did spend 3 full days healing, teaching, doing miracles, pointing people towards God. Isn't that enough? Yeah. Technically, yeah, that probably was. But as we saw in verse 32, where Jesus said, Jesus called his disciples to himself and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued with me for 3 days and they have nothing to eat. I don't want to send them away hungry, lest they faint along the way. Jesus did enough, but he felt compassion on them for who they were, for the needs that they had. They needed food. And by the way, this compassion that we're talking about is the exact same thing from the Luke 7 verse, where it saw earlier, where it was a type of pity, deep empathy, and move to the bowels. But this section of the feeding of the 4,000 has always struck me as interesting. Jesus saw these people who gathered to be with him. The time with these people who he cared for deeply. And he expressed compassion on them because he saw the need. He saw people who had a need that could be met, and he took pity on them. This is another example for the world today, for us today. There's always going to be people in our country, in our individual communities, in our circles, with pressing needs that can be met. We need to have compassion. We need to try to meet these needs. We can probably consider it good enough if we were Jesus leaving after 3 days of miracles for all asked, but not needing to go the extra mile. If we just do the bare minimum, saying like, well, I pay my taxes, I help the organizations that help with the homeless and the poor and those who are less fortunate, that's good enough. I'll give a few coins to the beggar at the corner. That's good enough. Jesus went the extra mile and showed compassion on the people that he was around, the less fortunate, the poor, the needy. We should too. The hard part to learn, and even harder part to practice, is to be compassionate even if you are exhausted or don't feel like it. And being compassionate to every single person, no matter what gender they are, no matter what race they are, no matter what economical status they are or political affiliation, no matter where their origin of birth was, or if they think a pronoun matters. Even if they add ketchup to a hot dog, which we all know is no. Being compassionate to the needs of people who are around you. Their physical needs, their emotional needs, and their most important need of all, their spiritual need. Because we are all sinners, friends. We are all sinners. Because of our sin, we are guilty. And the punishment for sin is to go to hell, be eternally separated from God forever, a place of torment. But because of Christ's death on the cross, taking all the consequences for our punishment, we can be made not guilty. Live forever in heaven with God in a wonderful place. Jesus' death and resurrection on the cross shows us that we need to be people who are compassionate, who show compassion. After all, the cross, these countless stories from the life of Jesus, are real life examples of compassion, of a deep pity, of a show empathy to people who don't deserve it. But compassion that is not limited to people who look like us, who maybe are just Christians, people who are within our realm of sphere of influence. If we keep limiting ourselves by putting filters and filters and filters on who deserves our compassion, that's silly and dumb. The Bible tells us that's not the right attitude. We are a source of compassion to all in this heartless world. Look what the Apostle Paul writes in Colossians 3. Verse 11 starts, "Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free. But Christ is all and in all. All right, listen up. Verse 12. Put on them as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also forgive. Paul is commanding us, instructing this church in Colossians from the original recipients, as well as any and all of us, to be compassionate, and there is no more excuses left. Paul tells us no matter who you are, where you're from, what you did, you need to be compassionate. You need to be an example of God. And especially if you have chosen to follow the Lord as God as your Savior. We are to be like God in every way. Compassionate, kind, humble, gentle, patient, forgiving. How great would the world be if each believer in God showed these characteristics of God to the entirety of the world, showing kindness to the hurting, compassionate to everyone, even on our social media networks, even if they don't vote the way we do. This charge from Paul, from God, to be people of compassion, just as Jesus was, just as Jesus is hard, because it means we have to shake off the norms that our society has fallen into, that our country has settled into, the selfishness, the hurtfulness, the hatred of anything that doesn't look like them. We need to rise above all that. And you know what? I learned this lesson the last time we played Munchkin at my house with our board game group. Munchkin is a card game. It's a role-playing card game where you have to compete to have the strongest character, basically. You take your character and you fight monsters to win treasure to get yourself better to win the game. The key is to, while make your character stronger, also to get help from other people. People who are kind and generous and helpful, who like to share with the treasure so everybody has a better advantage to defeat the monsters. I take a different route when I play. Normally, I like to blackmail people into helping me, or try to swindle them out of the reward they get, so I can get stronger faster, and it hasn't worked yet. The game usually, and has always, ended with the people around me not willing to help me, and the superpowered monster coming to fight me where I die and I lose the game. However, being kind and a compassionate person, somebody who is able to help other people in their time of need, is a key to winning this game and the key to winning life. We need to be more like God in every single way of our lives. Most importantly, by being compassionate to all people in all situations, just as God is to us. Even if it means letting yourself be opened up, personal, open for criticism and being vulnerable. The world is a cold, heartless, sinful place. We are sinners by nature, needing of God to forgive us, to show us love. We can do the same to the people in our lives, showing them why God loves us and offering them help, meeting their needs the best we can. See you next time, guys.